In the dry heat of a Texas summer, Ava Monroe packed the last of her boxes into the back seat of a borrowed Toyota Corolla. The sun hadn't yet crested the horizon, but the air already held that thick, humming tension, like something was waiting to snap. She didn't look back when she pulled out of her parents' driveway. There wasn't much to look back to, just a modest ranch-style house, paint peeling at the edges, and two aging oak trees that had watched her rehearse Shakespeare monologues barefoot in the yard since she was 10. Her mother had cried that morning, but Ava hadn't. Not once. Her mind was on California. More specifically, San Diego. She told people she was chasing the industry, the film industry, the TV studios, the casting calls. But San Diego wasn't Hollywood. It was quieter, less flashy, more accessible for someone like her. A girl with no agent, no credits, and just one dream big enough to blot out everything else. And someone had told her she had a shot. Nathan Graves. That was his name. A producer. Mid-level. Ran his own studio. Mostly reality shows, some streaming dramas that never made it past 2 seasons. But he had one thing she didn't: power. And Ava, smart in ways no resume could capture, knew exactly how valuable proximity was in a place like this. She met him at a casting mixer in Austin. It was a cramped bar with sticky floors and overpriced sangria, filled with the scent of ambition and desperation. Ava hadn't even planned to go. She wasn't on the guest list, she talked her way in. She always could. Nathan noticed her from across the bar. Not just because she was beautiful, lots of women there were beautiful. But Ava had something different. Stillness. Like she didn't need the room to notice her. Like she'd already decided it would. He bought her a drink. Asked about her reel. She didn't have one. That didn't bother him. Some people have it before the camera ever rolls, he said. They exchanged numbers. He texted later that night. If you're ever serious about this, come west. Let me show you what's possible. 2 weeks later, she was on the I-10 westbound. No backup plan. Just a duffel bag, her journal, and that one message saved on her lock screen like a prayer. Back in Virginia, Eli Monroe was beginning to notice the silence. Calls that used to come twice a day became once, then none. They had met in high school, stayed together through college. He proposed on a snowy December night outside a diner in Norfolk. She said yes. Not the kind of yes that comes with tears and squeals, but the kind that comes with a long hug and a promise to try. At the time, it had been enough. Eli was a Navy man. Disciplined. Predictable. He loved order the way Ava loved chaos. It was probably why they worked, until they didn't. He knew she was leaving. She told him she needed to try it once or regret it forever. He told her he'd wait. She didn't ask him to. Ava arrived in San Diego in late February. The air smelled different here. Selter. Brighter. The apartment she'd found online was smaller than advertised and more expensive than she could afford, but it had a view of the bay, if she leaned over the fire escape just right. She texted Nathan the first night. I'm here. When do we start? He replied minutes later. Tomorrow. Dress casual. You'll sit in on a production meeting. She barely slept. The next morning she wore her best blouse, soft beige, clean lines, and a pair of thrifted boots she hoped looked expensive. The office wasn't glamorous. A converted warehouse near the docks, with metal desks and energy drinks stacked beside LED lights. But Nathan greeted her like she belonged. Introduced her to a few team members. Told them she was shadowing production. No one questioned it. That afternoon he took her to lunch. They talked about his shows, her ambitions, the struggle of being taken seriously in an industry that chewed through hopefuls. He listened like no one had before, not her parents, not casting agents, not Eli. He asked about Virginia, about the fiancé. She shrugged. We're figuring it out. That night, she moved his name up in her favorites list. What Ava didn't notice, or didn't want to, was the tone of Nathan's interest. It wasn't just professional. It wasn't even romantic exactly. It was possessive. The way he leaned in when she spoke. The way he introduced her as my Ava at rap parties. The way he offered her a room in his place when her lease fell through, just until you get on your feet. She said yes, because it made sense, because it was easier, because success often wore the same smile as kindness. Eli found out about Nathan in pieces. A tagged photo here. A voicemail Ava forgot to delete. One night he called and asked directly, "Who's Nathan?" She paused. "He's helping me get auditions." That's all? Her silence was the wrong answer. But he didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He simply said, "Okay, I get it." She didn't reply. He hung up. And that's when the tone changed. From Eli's end, the calls became shorter, less frequent, more measured. But behind every message was a quiet recalculation, a man adjusting to betrayal, trying to decide whether to let go or hold on. In early May, Ava got a text. "I have leave next week. Thought I'd fly out. Surprise you." She hesitated, then typed, "Don't. I'll be busy. Maybe next month." He didn't reply, but he booked a flight anyway. No one knew what Eli was really thinking on that plane. Whether he wanted closure or confrontation. Maybe he didn't even know himself. Maybe it didn't matter. Because what came next, no one could take back. What started as a young woman chasing light was already beginning to cast shadows. It started with a voicemail. Ava had missed Eli's call. She was in a casting workshop when her phone buzzed, ignored on silent mode in her tote. By the time she saw the notification, it was already dark. She played it back, standing barefoot in her tiny kitchen, a cold slice of pizza in her hand. "Hey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a bit. Hope everything's good. I saw that picture of you and that producer guy, Graves, right? Looked like a fun event. Anyway, call me." There was no anger in his voice. Not yet. Just something slower. Like the beginning of erosion. She didn't call back. The next few days were full of movement. Ava was getting callbacks now, small parts, nothing major. Nathan had pulled strings to get her seen. She was starting to feel visible. At parties, people began to ask for her by name. Nathan would joke, "You're gonna owe me a 10% cut soon," but there was a shadow in the way he watched her work the room. One night, after an industry mixer downtown, he dropped her off and lingered in the driver's seat. "You know you could do better than playing the ingenue in these B-list pilots," he said. Ava raised an eyebrow. "You offering me something better?" He shrugged. "I'm offering the door. Whether you walk through it, that's on you." She smiled, then closed the car door without answering. She knew what that meant. But she also knew how to manage attention, especially the kind that came wrapped in power. Meanwhile, Eli had started doing something he never used to. He checked her social media, not just her posts but her tags, her likes. Every location check-in became a breadcrumb. Every tagged photo with Nathan made his throat tighten. When Ava finally returned a call 1 week later, her voice was light, rushed. "Hey, sorry, crazy week. We're prepping a short film pitch. I'm exhausted." "You sound happy," he said. She paused. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he replied. But it didn't sound like the truth. There was silence on the line. The kind that feels too loud. Eli exhaled. "You still wear the ring?" That one landed. Ava walked over to the small wooden dish near her bed. The engagement ring sat there, untouched for days, beside a tangle of earrings and a hair tie. "I keep it safe," she said. "That's not what I asked." She didn't answer. After that, the call shifted. Not in frequency but in texture. They became careful. Measured. Like both were afraid of saying something they couldn't take back. Nathan, sensing her distraction, pressed in. "You still talking to your military boyfriend?" he asked one night, half joking, half not, while they waited for takeout. Ava shot him a glance. "That's none of your business." He smiled, but there was an edge. "It is if he's the reason you pull back every time we get close." "We're not that close." Nathan leaned back in his seat. "Then you won't mind me helping you move next week." Her lease was ending. She had planned to sublet a cheaper studio closer to downtown. Nathan had offered to help with the move, and she'd said yes, partly out of convenience, partly out of guilt, and maybe, deep down, out of fear. Saying no might have meant burning a bridge she still needed. Eli didn't know that yet, but he could feel it. Late one night, he stared at his phone for almost half an hour before typing. "You still want me to visit next week? I can be there Wednesday. Got some time off." No reply. 12 hours later, she finally responded. "This week's crazy with the move. Let's wait a bit." The next day, Eli booked the flight anyway. He didn't tell her. Instead, he told himself he was just going to see things for himself. Maybe even fix what was left. But the duffel bag he packed, the one with an old sweatshirt, a second phone charger, and a rusted utility knife he always carried on base, hinted at something he couldn't admit even to himself. In San Diego, Ava's move went smoothly. Nathan showed up with his SUV, smiled for the neighbors, carried boxes like he'd done it 100 times. He was charming. No, strategic. He knew exactly how to perform helpfulness. Ava's new apartment was even smaller. A converted studio above a closed-down bakery. It had terrible insulation and smelled faintly of yeast. But it was hers. Nathan stayed late that night, claiming the couch until she practically pushed him out. She didn't sleep well. The city buzzed too loudly through the thin walls. Or maybe it was her own thoughts. The next morning, she was in the middle of unpacking when Eli called. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood frozen in her kitchen, phone buzzing on the counter, heartbeat unsteady. The sound stopped, then started again, then again, until it finally fell silent. She picked it up. 7 missed calls. She opened her messages. I'm in town. Can we talk? I'm outside. Ava dropped the phone. Outside, Eli stood beneath the crooked stairwell, hand resting on the rusted railing. He didn't knock. He just looked up at the door. Something in his posture had changed. It wasn't anger. Not yet. But whatever held him together during the flight, whatever restraint, reason, or faith he'd carried, was beginning to break apart. Inside, Ava reached slowly for the doorknob. Her fingers trembled. Not from fear of Eli, but from the sudden, sharp awareness that the two halves of her life, the quiet boy from Virginia and the sharp world of San Diego, had finally collided. And nothing good ever comes from impact. Ava didn't open the door. Not right away. She stood frozen behind it, her hands still on the doorknob, listening. Through the old wood and rusted hinges, she could hear nothing. No knocking. No footsteps. Just silence, that kind of heavy, stretched-out silence that feels louder than any shout. She didn't expect him to come. Not really. She thought maybe he'd take the hint. She thought maybe he'd feel the weight of her hesitation and stop trying. But Eli was never the type to retreat. And she had forgotten what it meant when a man like him stopped asking and simply acted. The peephole was blurry. The glass had long since been scratched, the result of a former tenant's cigarette habit or careless keys. But she could still make out the shape of him. Still unmoving, arms loose at his sides, not pacing, not knocking. Just standing there. She stepped back from the door. Texted Nathan. Eli's here. I didn't tell him to come. What do I do? He didn't answer. She called him. Voicemail. Ava threw the phone on the couch. Then finally the knock came. Not loud. Just once. 2 short taps like punctuation. Ava, Eli's voice came through, steady, restrained. Please open the door. And she did. The latch clicked, the wood creaked, and suddenly the two of them were face to face for the first time in 6 months. She looked different. Thinner. More defined. Hair styled differently. Tired but polished, like the kind of tired that came from chasing something, not just surviving. He looked the same. Except for his eyes. They were harder. Like something behind them had changed shape. Hi, she said, barely audible. Hi. A long pause. Too long. The kind that drowns everything else. I didn't know you were coming, she said. I figured. He stepped past her without waiting for permission. She shut the door slow. Quiet. He walked into the small living room and looked around. It was barely furnished. A couch, a coffee table, a few unpacked boxes. A single mug sat on the counter with cold tea. A pair of heels tucked near the baseboard. He scanned the space like a detective, but didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His silence said more than words. You want something to drink? Ava offered, more as a habit than hospitality. He didn't respond. Just turned to her and asked, Are you living with him? The words landed like a slap. Excuse me? Nathan Graves. Are you living with him? Her jaw tightened. No. I moved here last week. He helped me with the truck. That's it. Eli nodded. Slowly. What? But something about that nod wasn't right. It wasn't acceptance. It was inventory. He was collecting facts, tallying inconsistencies. You forgot to mention that when I asked, he said. I didn't think it mattered. It always matters. Ava crossed her arms. Why are you really here? Eli looked away. I thought we could talk. Figure things out. You didn't text me. You didn't ask. I did. You didn't answer. I told you not to come this week. I came anyway. They stared at each other for a beat too long. It wasn't anger yet. But it was heading there, the slow burn before combustion. Eli dropped onto the couch. Exhaled. Ran a hand through his hair. Do you love him? He asked quietly. Ava sat across from him. I don't know him well enough to love him. That's not a no. And you're not my interrogator, Eli? He flinched at that. Just barely. But Ava saw it. She stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'm tired, she said. Of this. Of you showing up with questions and pretending like I owe you something. I flew across the country to see you. And now you have. Silence again. Only this time it wasn't neutral. It was sharp. Bladed. One word away from cutting deep. Eli stood. I need to get some air. Ava didn't stop him. He walked out without another word. The door closed softly behind him. She didn't know where he went. Didn't check. Outside, Eli sat in the stairwell. The morning had burned into noon. Heat clung to the railing. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A delivery truck rumbled by, indifferent to the silent war happening above. He took out his phone and scrolled through her photos again. The ones she hadn't deleted. The ones with Nathan. Her hand on his shoulder. Laughing at some joke. Wearing the same dress he once helped her zip up for a military gala. Something dark cracked open inside him. He put the phone down and stared at nothing. The next time he knocked, it would be harder. That evening, Ava stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. Nathan still hadn't responded. She figured he was busy. Or maybe just pissed. He didn't like surprises, and Eli was a surprise no one had planned for. She heard footsteps outside. Assumed it was Eli returning. When the knock came again, this time loud, fast, urgent, her heart jumped. She opened the door. Eli stood there. His eyes were wild. His fists clenched. Sweat on his brow. But he didn't say anything. Just pushed past her hard enough to make her stumble. "Eli," she shouted, turning after him. "What the hell are you doing?" But he was already walking toward the bedroom. "Where is he?" he barked. "Who?" "Nathan. He's here, right?" "No. He's not. Eli." But Eli flung open the bedroom door. The bed was empty. Sheets half made. No one there. He turned. Looked at her. She saw it then, the panic beneath the anger. The fear he was being made a fool of. And in that moment, something in Eli's expression shifted. Not rage. Resolve. That kind of resolve that doesn't think anymore. It just acts. It had begun. The next knock wouldn't be on the door. It would be on fate. It happened before 7 a.m. The sun had barely risen over the rooftops of San Diego, casting long blue shadows across the cracked sidewalks. Inside the apartment above the shuttered bakery, the air was still, heavy with stale coffee, worn-out dreams, and the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from something being held back too long. Ava stirred awake to pounding on the door. Not a knock. Not a request. A demand. She jolted upright. Her phone was dead. Her mind blurry from a half-sleep filled with too many worries and too little rest. The banging came again. "Ava." It was Eli. His voice wasn't just raised. It was rattling. Not drunk. Not high. But something worse, certain. That terrifying kind of certainty a person reaches when their version of truth stops listening to reason. She threw on a hoodie and stumbled toward the door. Her hand hovered over the lock. "Eli, what's going on?" "It's too early." "Open the door." When she did, his eyes were bloodshot. His breathing shallow. He was gripping something in his right hand. Not a weapon, not yet, just his phone. The screen cracked. His jaw clenched. "You lied to me," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You lied about him. About everything." Ava took a step back. "I told you, Nathan helped me move. That's it. You said he wasn't here." "He's not." Eli pushed past her again, this time with even more force. She stumbled against the wall. "Eli, stop." He didn't hear her. Or maybe he did and didn't care. He stormed through the small apartment, yanking open closets, kicking the bathroom door open, checking behind curtains. Like a man on a mission he'd already decided had a target. Facts be damned. "There's no one here." Ava shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" He turned to her, chest heaving. "You think I'm stupid?" "I think you're scared." That made him freeze. Just for a second. His eyes widened, not with anger but exposure. Like she'd just seen something in him he didn't want seen. "You left," he said, voice low now. "You left and I waited. I kept waiting. For what? For this. You think I owe you my life because you waited? No. I think you owe me honesty. I gave you years, Eli. And I gave you everything." The words echoed in the room like bullets. Neither of them moved. Then came the knock that neither of them expected. A soft, polite tap-tap on the doorframe. Ava turned, confused. Eli's face twisted. Standing in the doorway was Nathan. Still in his gym clothes, holding a paper bag and coffee. He froze. So did they. The whole room paused, like a video buffering just before the climax. Nathan glanced at Ava, then at Eli. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, voice even. "I just wanted to drop this off. You left your charger at my place." The bag dangled slightly in his hand. Eli stared at it like it was a grenade. "I'm gonna need you to leave," Ava said softly to Nathan. Nathan looked at her. "Are you sure?" "Yes." A moment passed. Then, slowly, Nathan nodded and stepped back into the hallway. The door closed, and Eli laughed. Not a joyful laugh. The kind that breaks in the middle. The kind that sounds like someone trying to keep themselves from unraveling. You still say there's nothing? I didn't invite him. But you let him in. Ava's voice cracked. Eli, please. I'm done with this. I'm done with you if this is who you've become. He went quiet. So. Then he said, you're not the only one who gets to start over. She didn't know what he meant by that. But she would. He walked out that morning. No slammed doors. No final words. Just silence and then footsteps fading down the stairs. Ava collapsed onto the couch, hands shaking, unsure if it was from relief or fear. She didn't know he hadn't gone far. Eli sat 2 blocks away. In his rental car. Engine off. Windows cracked. The charger in Nathan's bag. That line. You left it at my place. He replayed it over and over. There was no proof. But there didn't need to be. He knew. In his mind, the betrayal was complete. The story was written. And if that chapter had ended, he was about to start a new one. One where he was no longer the fool. One where pain was currency, and someone was going to pay in full. If Ava had looked out the window that night, she might have seen the car still parked there. Might have noticed the figure inside, unmoving. Watching. But she didn't. She poured herself a glass of water, put on an old sweatshirt, and crawled into bed. And when she finally fell asleep, she dreamt of the ocean. She didn't hear her phone buzz once before it died again. A single message. Don't worry. I understand now. May 9th started like any other spring morning in San Diego. The bakery below Ava's apartment remained closed. The sign still faded, the windows still taped. Outside, a street cleaning truck hummed past. Inside, the apartment was quiet. No music. No TV. Just the rustling of moving boxes and the low hum of the refrigerator. Ava stood at the bathroom sink, brushing her teeth, eyes puffy from a night of fractured sleep. She hadn't heard from Eli since the morning before. No texts. No calls. Not even a voicemail. That silence, after everything, had started to feel more unnerving than the shouting. She told herself it was over. He'd come, said what he needed to say, and left. She just didn't know how completely wrong that belief was. Down the street, Eli was already awake. He hadn't slept. Not really. He'd parked in a quiet alley 2 blocks from her place. Sat in the car for hours, lights off, engine cold. The air inside the vehicle was stale, heavy with condensation. The back seat was cluttered with empty bottles of water and a balled-up sweatshirt. His phone lay on the passenger seat, screen cracked and dark. In his lap, the same utility knife he'd always kept from his time on base. Reliable. A tool, not a weapon. Until now. He kept rolling it between his fingers. Not opening it. Just feeling the weight. That morning, something inside him shifted. Not snapped. Settled. Like a stone finally sinking to the bottom of a lake. His thoughts became strangely calm. He stepped out of the car just after 8 a.m., hoodie pulled low, hands in his pockets. No one paid him much attention. He looked like anyone else, tired, aimless, dressed in muted tones. By the time he reached Ava Street, he already knew what he was going to do. Ava was drying her hair when the buzzer rang. She flinched. No one buzzed at 8 a.m. Not in this building. She checked her phone, dead again. Plugged into the wall, still refusing to charge. Typical. The buzzer rang again. She opened the window slightly, leaned out, and looked down. Eli was at the front gate. She didn't yell. Didn't wave. Just stared. He looked up. And smiled. That smile chilled her more than any shouting ever could. Still, out of reflex, she buzzed him in. When she opened the door, he stood there calmly. Same hoodie. Same silence. Something unreadable in his eyes. You left something, he said. What? Closure. Before she could react, he stepped in and shut the door behind him. What are you doing here, Eli? She asked, her voice tight. Just needed to say goodbye the right way. She backed up slightly. I think you already did that. He took a step forward. I don't think I meant it. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter, still dark. You're scaring me, she said softly. Are you scared of me? He asked as if it was a curious question, not an accusation. No, she said. But it wasn't convincing. He looked at the room again. The details. The couch they used to fall asleep on during long calls. The mug she once sent him in the mail. Still on the shelf. You lied, he said. No, I didn't. You let him in. He was never in the way you think. That's not how it looked. That's not my problem, Eli. His breathing changed. You let me believe. You let me hope. And all this time. It wasn't all this time, she cut in. You left long before I did. You just didn't notice. That broke something. In one motion he reached for her wrist. Not violently, at first. Just holding. "Let go," she said. "You didn't?" "Let go." She shoved him, but he didn't stumble. Just got closer. His hands moved faster than her scream. A flash of silver. The sound of breath cut short. She felt the slice before she saw the blade. Then she was on the floor. The next few seconds were chaos. A struggle of limbs. Gasping. Curses. Blood. Her blood. On the linoleum. But it wasn't her he was there for. It was Nathan. By the time Nathan arrived at the apartment, sometime just after 9:10 a.m., the front door was slightly ajar. He thought that was strange. He nudged it open. "Ava?" Silence. He stepped in. What he saw stopped him cold. The blood. A trail of it. Across the kitchen floor. Handprints on the counter. A cracked phone on the tile. And Ava, barely conscious, curled near the couch, one hand pressed weakly to her stomach. "Call police," she whispered. Nathan didn't think. He ran out of the apartment and down the hall, yelling for help. He didn't see the man hiding in the stairwell. Didn't see the glint of the blade behind the railing. Didn't have time to react when Eli stepped forward, silent and fast. The hallway filled with chaos. A scream. Then nothing. By the time paramedics arrived, the building was in lockdown. Ava was rushed to the hospital, barely alive. Nathan was pronounced dead at the scene. Eli was gone. No witnesses. No security footage from the floor. The back exit had been propped open with a trash can. He had vanished into the city. The news broke by noon. Former Navy officer wanted in brutal double attack. One dead, one in critical condition. The image shown, Eli's old Navy ID. A photo from better years. Before betrayal. Before the silence. Ava survived. Barely. But she never spoke to the media. Never gave interviews. Never told the full version of what happened inside that apartment. Only one person knew. And he had disappeared. The street outside Ava's apartment was cordoned off by 9:45 a.m. Yellow tape fluttered in the soft coastal breeze, anchored to light poles and stair rails. Police cruisers lined the sidewalk. A forensics van arrived minutes later, followed by a pair of unmarked sedans. Inside the building, the air had turned clinical. Cold. Still. Nathan's body remained in the hallway for nearly 2 hours as crime scene techs documented every inch. He had a defensive wound on his forearm, a deep slash across the ribs, and a fatal puncture wound near the heart. No witnesses had seen the attack itself. No cameras in the hallway. No screams heard beyond the walls, just one neighbor mentioning a loud thud and a sound like furniture being moved. That was it. Inside the apartment, Ava Monroe was gone. Rushed to Mercy Hospital under critical condition, she arrived conscious, barely, and lost consciousness shortly after. She had lost significant blood. Multiple lacerations, primarily to the lower abdomen and left side. One wound dangerously close to her kidney. When detectives first tried to speak with her that afternoon, she was intubated, pale, and unable to speak. So they focused on the next best thing, what was left behind. Detective Laura Pine had seen Messier crime scenes, bloodier, louder, even stranger. But something about this one got under her skin. It was too clean. Yes, there was blood. Yes, there were signs of struggle. But the layout of the apartment felt arranged. The violence had a direction, a rhythm, a start and an end. She stood in the center of the living room, glancing at the blood smear on the counter, the shattered phone, the overturned mug. She pointed to the hallway. "He came in through the front, exited the back," she said aloud. Her partner, Detective Ruiz, nodded. "Neighbor says the back door was ajar. Exit stairwell leads to the alley. No cameras." "Of course," Pine muttered. They moved through the scene in silence for a while. Ruiz took photos. Pine flipped through the scattered documents on the coffee table. A printed casting sheet. A handwritten audition schedule. A torn envelope from the Navy Federal Credit Union, addressed to Lieutenant Eli Monroe. Ruiz looked up. "That the fiancé?" "Was," Pine replied. Back at the precinct, they pulled his file. Former Navy lieutenant. No criminal record. Served 8 years, 2 deployments. Honorably discharged 6 months ago. They pulled his recent travel. 2 days prior. Flight from Norfolk to San Diego. One way. The credit card he booked with was used again the next morning to buy a pair of gloves, a 6-inch kitchen utility knife, and a gallon of bleach at a convenience store 4 blocks from Ava's apartment. Pine leaned back in her chair. "That's not groceries." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "You think he planned it?" Pine hesitated. Not in the classic sense, she said. But something broke. And once it did, everything moved fast. That night, they found security footage from a gas station in South Park. 7:12 a.m. May 9th. A tall white male, hoodie up, entered alone. Bought a protein bar, a pack of gum, and paid cash. But just as he exited, the angle caught a glimpse of his face under the awning light. It was Eli. Timestamp matched 20 minutes before the attack. At the hospital, Ava regained consciousness around 2 a.m. the next day. She didn't ask about Nathan. Not immediately. She asked where she was. Then she asked if he had been caught. Detective Pine arrived 4 hours later. Stood quietly by the foot of the bed, notepad in hand. Ava's voice was raspy, barely audible. But her eyes were sharp, alive, and afraid. Do you remember what happened? Pine asked gently. Ava blinked. Once, twice, then nodded. She told them everything. Eli had come early. Said he wanted closure. She let him in. He seemed calm at first, but beneath it, something felt wrong. She tried to talk him down. Tried to keep him from spiraling. He asked questions she couldn't answer. Then Nathan showed up. That's when everything changed. She said Eli snapped. She didn't remember the blade at first. Just the pain. Then screaming. Then blood. Then darkness. Pine asked the final question. Was this the first time he'd ever hurt you? Ava didn't answer. But her silence said more than yes ever could. By the end of that week, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Eli Monroe. But he was gone. No flights under his name. No credit card activity. No car rentals. Nothing. It was as if he had disappeared between one breath and the next. The last confirmed sighting was from a delivery driver near the city line, who said he saw a guy in a military hoodie hitchhiking westbound. No ID. No bag. Just a look in his eyes the driver would later describe as lost, but dangerous. The case went national within days. Headlines called it the San Diego Love Triangle murder, which Ava hated. They said she was caught between two men. But Ava knew better. She wasn't between two men. She had simply loved the wrong one for too long, and underestimated what that love could become when fed nothing but silence and suspicion. In her hospital bed, she stared out the window at the quiet skyline. San Diego had never felt farther away from the dream she came for. And somewhere out there, a man who once loved her, now carried only her blood. They never found him. Weeks passed. Then months. The case stayed open but grew cold. Not because no one cared, but because Eli Monroe had vanished like smoke into wind. No fingerprints beyond the apartment. No digital trail. No credible sightings. He didn't use a passport. Didn't access a bank account. Didn't even make a mistake. It was as if the man who had once sent Ava love letters from overseas deployments had died that day, and left only a shadow behind. Ava recovered slowly. She left the hospital 2 weeks after the attack, limping, thinner, and quieter. Her manager offered to set up a press interview. She refused. Her parents begged her to come home to Texas. She declined that too. Instead, she stayed in San Diego, in a different apartment, under a different name on the lease. No social media. No auditions. She'd come to California chasing a dream. Now she woke up each day chasing the quiet. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, she would sit at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea gone cold, and ask herself, what if I had said no when he first called that morning? What if I hadn't buzzed him in? The answer never changed. She survived. But survival came with a debt. A wound that didn't bleed but whispered. Detective Pine visited her once in early autumn. She brought a thin manila envelope. Inside, an updated case report and a photo. A security camera still from a truck stop near the Arizona border. The figure wasn't confirmed. But the face, half-lit, half-shadowed, looked familiar. Why? Or someone just like him. Pine didn't push. Instead, she said, if he's alive, he's running from more than us now. Ava didn't ask what that meant. But she understood. The city moved on. Headlines faded. Other crimes filled the news cycle. Other names replaced theirs. But in the quiet corners of forums and podcasts, the case lingered, as a warning, as a ghost story. The soldier who broke. The woman who lived. And the man who disappeared. 1 year later, Ava stood alone on a beach in La Jolla. Early morning. Wind in her hair. Her scar hidden beneath a sweater. She had started writing again. Not scripts. Not screenplays. But a manuscript. A memoir. Not for publication. Just for herself. She wrote about love. About delusion. About the fine thread between longing and obsession, and how easily it snaps. And in the final chapter, she wrote a single sentence. Some wounds don't close, they just walk away. Somewhere across state lines, a man with no ID checked into a roadside motel. He didn't talk much. Paid in cash. Moved on every few weeks. At night, he stared at the ceiling, imagining the sound of footsteps outside his door. He never turned off the bathroom light. And each time he looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize the man looking back. Because Eli Monroe didn't just kill someone. He killed the only version of himself he ever trusted. Now he lived in exile, not by law but by memory. Ava never saw him again. But she never needed to. Because she carried the ending with her every day, in her skin, her breath, her voice. She didn't need a conviction. She had survived. And survival in the face of someone who thought he owned you was the loudest justice of all.